Are you confused about insurance for herbal businesses? You're not alone. Join the Herbal Business Program and get straightforward advice about each type of business insurance. Do you need it? Will it actually cover you? And most importantly, how to read the fine print so that you know for sure what you're getting. You'll also learn all the other things you should be thinking about when you think about insurance, including how to create a quote-unquote due diligence file for yourself, so that if anything ever does happen, your lawyers will have everything they need to defend you. Of course, the likelihood of this kind of trouble is less than the likelihood of being struck by lightning, but if you're thinking about insurance, why not also take these simple steps just to make sure you've covered every possible base? And that's not all. The Herbal Business Program covers every aspect of your herbal business, from building your business plan all the way through to cross-platform marketing, all with unlimited lifetime access, fast answers to all your questions, and twice weekly live Q&A sessions so that you can get in-person support. So the Herbal Business Program is brought to you by our friends over at Commonwealth Holistic Herbalism. That's with Katja Swift and Midura. And that's who's in today's episode. This is an oldie but a goodie, and I felt like it was timely, so I wanted to republish it. But I definitely recommend, if you have an herbal business you're looking at getting it up and running, this is a great foundation for you. I'll leave a link to the Herbal Business Program with Katja in the show notes. So please click there to learn more and to register. And you can always reach out to me or Katja or Rin with any questions you might have. Now on to today's show. Enjoy. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. The content in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to cure, diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. This information has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. We are not doctors, nor do we play one on the internet. Please seek advice from a qualified healthcare professional. Okay, MC Calico, take it away.
Yeah. Smoking herbal blends. We need some Mullen and some Kush, my brethren. While listening to Herb Rally podcast again. Herbalism at its finest with Mason Hutchinson. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rin.
And I'm Katja.
And we're here with the Commonwealth Center for Holistic Herbalism in Boston, Massachusetts. Speaking to you again through Herb Rally. And today we wanted to talk a little bit about the ever-present elderberry syrup and our particular home variation on that.
So every year about this time, we head down to the river and we harvest what we call Charles River winter syrup.
Because it's more than just elderberry.
Yeah, it's got all kinds of stuff in it. It doesn't actually have the Charles River in it, but
No, I'm not sure that would be
medicinal.
I mean, it's better now than it was 20 years ago, but still not quite all the way there.
Yeah. But it has all kinds of really great plants in it that are all growing together. And this is the medicine that we will use all winter long for sniffles and earaches, colds, and if the flu comes around, that too. So every year we make about a half a gallon or so. And at the first sign that there's any kind of problem, the first sign that somebody is sniffling or sneezing or whatever, everybody in the family takes a half an ounce or so a couple times a day, and it works great.
Every year, the formula is a little bit different, and it's based on what plants are abundant and are available at the time that we go out there to harvest the major ingredients. This is based on the idea that when a landscape shows a formula to you, you should pay attention and see what's coming out of that might broaden your horizons a little bit or might make interesting connections that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And that's certainly been our experience when we go out there and put this together.
Yeah. So the base of the formula, and we always make sure that these four are there, is elderberry, sumac, loosestrife, and goldenrod. And then beyond that, we use whatever is abundant. Those four are pretty reliably abundant on the several acres of wild land that we go and harvest from. They're pretty much always there. So they form kind of the base. And then every year, we just add to it and go from there. So this year, we've got elderberry, loosestrife, that's purple loosestrife, goldenrod, sumac, catnip, St. John's wort, and wild lettuce, mullen, and a pinch of nettle seed.
So, should we talk a little bit about some of the medicine from each of these? Or
Yeah.
So, elderberry is kind of the foundation of the formula, and, if we just look at it by volume in our jar, the elderberry is taking up like a third,
Yeah.
and all of the other herbs are filling in the rest of the space, so we really want to emphasize that particular one. Elderberry is a really important remedy that many herbalists are already familiar with for dealing with cold and flu. The berry has a bit of an immune-stimulating activity to it. It's sort of like ringing the alarm bells and waking your immune system up. So when you're first starting to feel those sniffles or that inflammation or the sore throat just starting to come on, that's the best time really to take your elderberry preparation and get it early, get a lot of it, and get it really moving in there to stimulate that response and get everything knocked out while it's still containable. So elderberry has some specific remedies or medicine to it that's quite important for dealing with the flu in particular. Elderberry has some polyphenols that seem to be able to disable this thing called the neuraminidase spike or neuraminidase enzyme that the flu virus uses to penetrate your cell walls. Viruses, of course, they don't live freestanding. They need to inject themselves into your own cells and convert them into little virus-making factories to kind of complete their life cycle. So if we can block the virus from being able to get into your cells, then we can stop it right there. And that way you won't really get the infection, and you'll prevent the virus from causing any further trouble for you. So that's like one sort of molecular mechanism that's been identified that's relevant to elderberry's efficacy. It's certainly not the only one. Don't get tricked into thinking it's something like that and trying to make a pharmaceutical version of it. That's actually been tried. There are other neuraminidase inhibitors, like Theraflu, for instance. It's a pharmaceutical product based on the similar mechanism, and that one is pretty roundly understood these days to just not really be effective at all. So, so that sort of isolated approach has, once again, kind of let people down. So, go back to the plant and get the elderberry.
Yeah. Plus, it's got vitamin C and vitamin purple and, all that great stuff in it in addition.
Yeah. So that's the role elderberry is playing in this particular format, in this particular blend. Then we have Loosestrife.
Oh, Loosestrife. I love you. So, Loosestrife, a lot of people, and you might be one of them, that's fine. A lot of people are out there thinking, purple loosestrife, it's a scourge on the whatever, and it's terrible, it's so invasive, and it is abundant in some areas, but I think that plants that are really abundant are such a gift, because that means that we can harvest them abundantly and not be afraid that we're going to hurt them or put the ecosystem in danger. There are 2 books that I want to reference. One is called Where Do Camels Belong? And it's by Ken Thompson. Another is called Invasive Plant Medicine by Tim Scott. And these are 2 really great books. The first one is really a scientist's perspective on rethinking invasive plants. And starting to realize that our initial philosophies about invasiveness were maybe not fully formed, and we need to let those ideas mature somewhat. So, and then Tim Scott is writing about, he takes all these plants that are listed as invasive, and it's basically this beautiful materia medica telling you how to work with those plants. Because if that plant is super abundant, or if you want to call it invasive, well, you can use chemicals to kill it, or you can just go pick it all and turn it into medicine. So that's a way better way of dealing with it if you have too much. I'll also include, there's a really great study, I'll send a link along for that, that they were doing along the Hudson River, because purple loosestrife actually is a remediator, a pollution remediator. It can break down PCBs in the soil and in the water and make them harmless. So that's really, really amazing. And sometimes I think that if we see loosestrife in really huge quantities, that maybe that's an indication that the water there isn't very safe. and that loosestrife has a job to do. That doesn't mean that every place you see loosestrife, there's PCB contamination, so don't worry. But it's really nice to know that hey, this is a plant that can help us clean up our mess, and we can be really grateful for that. But in this particular formula, loosestrife is not doing anything with PCBs. It actually is really just excellent for colds and flu. Even really strong sort of pandemic level cold and flu is great medicine for. So anytime that I'm thinking about colds and flu, it is always right there at the top of my list. Also, the bees love it. It's a pollinator plant, and it's one of those really important late season pollinator plants that help our bees get through the winter. So that's really excellent too. And if you can get honey that's made of purple loosestrife pollen, then that is a huge bonus. And we have on our blog an Herb of the Week listing for purple loosestrife, where I talk about more stuff. But one of my favorite things to mention is that we've had a lot of success with purple loosestrife against athlete's foot. And athlete's foot is really hard to work with. But once we were traveling and my daughter had it, and we had this apitherapy brand from Honey Gardens, this throat spray that had loosestrife and usnea in it. And I was like, I don't know, we don't have very much with us, we'll just use that because usnea is good. And it worked fantastically. And then later, just usnea on its own didn't do nearly as good of a job. And I realized that it was the loosestrife that was really potentiating that work. So but here it's just for its cold and flu application, which are nothing to sneeze at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we also have some goldenrod in here, and now's the time for goldenrod. It's looking lovely out there these days, at least where we live. So goldenrod is contributing a few things here, primarily based on its aromatic content. So goldenrod has some volatile oils, and it has this sort of peppery flavor to it that rises out of those. And those are stimulating. They lend some diaphoretic quality or diaphoretic activity to the overall formula. Help to keep your blood circulating out to the periphery and up to the surface. That can be helpful in allowing a fever to run its course and to be effective, both in terms of raising the heat to a degree that's necessary to fight off the infection, and also to make sure that the heat moves around the body and doesn't just get stuck in the core. So goldenrod's contributing on that level. Like loosestrife, it has a bit of an astringency to it, and that can be helpful if there's a really runny, state in your mucous membrane. So that could be in your sinuses with the drippy, runny nose, or it could be in the lungs where there's lots of watery mucus production. Goldenrod is going to help to tamp that down and tone that up a little bit.
Plus, so nice for your kidneys. And I feel like anytime you're sick, just giving your kidneys a little extra support is so good.
Keep those fluids moving.
Yeah. And then there's sumac in there, and mostly it is the berries of the staghorn sumac. There's some leaves in there too, which are really great for their astringency. But the berries are really what I focus on in this syrup. They are just a huge vitamin C source and lots of antioxidants, your anthocyanins again, and all that good stuff. So, it's like just super vitamin awesomeness. Yeah,
sumac's pretty fantastic. And it lends a pleasant flavor as well.
Yeah. This year there's more catnip than almost any previous year because the catnip was so abundant.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a big wild patch of catnip, and it's growing all interspersed with these nettles that are like 8 feet tall. And it's so strong, and like each leaf is so tough and strong, and the smell is so strong that like even when you're walking on the trail, as you come around the corner, like long before you see it, you can smell it. This is like some really potent catnip.
Nice. Yeah, catnip's one of my personal favorites for lots of reasons, many of them having to do with effects on digestive function and the nervous system and your sort of mental state. And some of those are certainly going to contribute here. I mean, often when you do feel sick, you have a little nausea, a little upset stomach. When you're stressed out, with us, it's usually of the nature of like, there's too much to do. I don't have time to get sick.
Yeah.
So something that's going to help you to relax and settle in a bit is really helpful there. But catnip also has a nice relaxant effect to it that's very helpful, again, to ensure that heat and fluids are moving around the body and not being obstructed by tension or constriction. Particularly that diaphoretic effect here. This is more of what we call a relaxant diaphoretic, where it's relieving some constriction or some tension on the surface of the body, and again allowing the heat to move through. That can be very helpful. Again, in a lot of this is you see that many of these herbs are here to support a fever in different ways, either to bump up the heat of it and make it reach that killing degree, or killing the microbes, not you, or just to relieve obstructions and to get things out of the way so that it can function the way it's supposed to. And with herbalism, that's often the way that we're going to approach this kind of a problem. The fever itself isn't the illness. We're not going to put in herbs here that are refrigerant or that are going to cool you down and prevent that fever from being present. We're going to support the fever. The fever is your body fighting off the infection. The flu virus would prefer you not to have a fever at all. That way it would be skating by unseen and unnoticed, and it would get away.
And the reason that the fever is functional is because pathogens don't actually like the temperature to get too warm. They prefer a temperature like around 97. And 98.6 is too warm for a lot of pathogens, which is why a human body tries to stick around that particular temperature. But raising the temperature of the body makes it more likely or more difficult for pathogens to live, because they just can't live with those higher temperatures.
So again, catnip can help with that.
This year we had a really late bloom of the St. John's wort. And, normally it's just huge and blooming and beautiful right around the solstice. And we did have some of it blooming at the solstice. But when I went out a couple weeks ago, it was August 10th. And there was St. John's wort just blooming everywhere. So it's pretty unusual for it to be blooming that late here. And I took that as a sign and said, well, okay, I'm putting that in my basket. And so I did. Hypericum is really fantastic liver support. And just like whenever you're sick, I like to think about your kidneys and help your kidneys deal with it, because all that crud and the debris from like the molecular or the cellular level warfare with the immune system and the pathogens, and boy, I just militarized that quite a lot. But all of that debris that's left over has to be removed from the body. And a lot of that happens in the kidneys. But the liver is also playing a huge role with detox and everything else. And again, remember that detoxification is largely about your endogenous toxins, about the toxins that, just the trash that builds up from everyday life, and just the work that your body has to do in any given day. So whenever somebody's sick, I also want to support their kidneys and, their liver and their kidneys. And so that Hypericum being everywhere was like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do that.
So some flower heads in there, some leaves. Both. Yeah. Okay. And then this year there was also a decent amount of wild lettuce to work with. So wild lettuce is a sedative and also a hypnotic. When you take it on its own, if you had a tincture of wild lettuce alone, then that would often be sufficient to knock you out, or at least to really, really push you in the direction of sleep. In this blend, we don't expect the overall formula to have a sledgehammer type hypnotic sedative effect and really make you super sleepy. But there's enough wild lettuce in there that this is definitely something you can take close to bedtime to help you to rest, to relax, and to transition into good sleep, where a lot of your healing is really going to take place. So that's the major thing, is to, again, release tension, relieve anxiety and worry, and allow you to rest and to allow your body to recover. When we tincture wild lettuce, we always make sure to include the stalks. With many other herbs, you want to strip the leaves off of the stalk and just keep the leaf. But in the case of wild lettuce, the stalk is very important to include because there's some sap in there, and that contains the major medicinally active compounds and virtues. So we always include that.
And then there are a handful of big, beautiful mullen leaves, and they are from first-year mullen plants, so that's when they're still low to the ground. They haven't sent up their stalk yet. And mullen is really nice for helping you to get the crud up out of your lungs. If elecampane grew in this area, I might, I certainly would be putting elecampane in there, but it doesn't. But mullen is really, really excellent, sort of along those same lines, really to help just bring up that crud and also to help move moisture to the lungs. So that can be really useful because, sometimes you're sick and you just have too much moisture everywhere. But with the pathogens, they get in the respiratory tract and they're like in your lungs. And then your immune responders are basically encapsulating them in mucus, and then you cough that up, and that's your phlegm. So if that is too dried out, then it's very difficult to cough up. You do want it to have, the sort of consistency that you can still get it up and out of you. So that can be very helpful there.
All right, and then finally, at least for this year anyway, we had a little bit of nettle seed. So
just a pinch.
Yeah. So nettle seed here is primarily about supporting the adrenal glands. And, like you've been saying with the liver and the kidneys having a bit of extra work to do while you're sick and cleaning out the crud and all of that. We also want to think about supporting the adrenals. They're going to be involved. They're going to have a little bit of extra work to do here as well. And of course, they sit right on top of the kidneys, and so they're rooted in them kind of like a plant is rooted in the soil. So we want to give the adrenals a bit of extra love. And nettle seed is also, considered adaptogenic in nature, so that's to help the body to be better able to cope with all types of stress, and that does include pathogenic stress. So when we have a more balanced and responsive endocrine system, and we're taking care of our stress response on the hormonal level, then we're better able to cope with illness in addition to, work and play and politics and all the other things that might be stressful for an individual. So there's nettle seed playing a role.
So that's who we harvested this year. And I went out and I put everybody in a big basket. I came home. And usually I would tincture any given plant by itself. And the reason is that, of course, we have a large apothecary and we're formulating for students or clients or ourselves or whatever. And over the course of the year, any given plant might be used in multiple different ways. So having all your tinctures as simples is really great because you have a lot of versatility that way. You can create as many formulas as you want with that plant. But when I know for sure that I'm specifically going out to get the medicine to make a particular formula, then I would rather tincture them all together. It's kind of like cooking, where, you put in all your spices and then you simmer it for a while so that all those flavors can get really friendly in there. And I feel the same way about tincturing a formula, where it's going to be that this is the formula that you're trying to get. So we might as well put them all in there and let them get good and friendly. And plus, I always have a little fun with this. I like to layer it in the jar so it's pretty and you can see every different plant that's in there. And I like to sort of shake it every day and be active with it, it's just nice. It's kind of like baking cookies. You can go get store-bought cookies and they'll probably be okay. But the cookies that your grandma made for you are better. Because grandma, because she cared and she loved you and she wanted. So I feel the same way about the medicine. Like, I want to care about it and I want to give it a little attention every day. So I do.
So there's that one jar, and that's the tincture portion.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those herbs mixed in with the alcohol, tincturing in there for a while.
And we just use straight up vodka, Cheetos, I think.
And then we have a second jar, and over there, that was where we put in the elderberries and also some loosestrife. And in that jar, that's got the honey in it.
Mm-hmm. There's elderberries in both jars. There's elderberries in the tincture, but also in this honey jar. And there's no alcohol in this jar. There's just, we put in, I don't know, 2 cups, 3 cups of elderberries and a bunch of loosestrife, and then just filled the quart jar with honey and let the honey extract. And it is so purple, I can't even tell you. So then we will, once they are good and ready, usually we let them sit until like the first person gets sick.
Yeah.
So they're still hanging out. But when it's time, we'll strain them and mix them together so that we have this nice syrupy elixir. A lot of people like to make their syrups with sugar, and that way they're shelf stable. But I don't really like to use sugar unless I can't avoid it. So if I were to just use honey, that would not be shelf stable. But mixing the honey with the alcohol does make it shelf stable. You don't have to worry that it's going to mold. So it's pretty good there.
Yeah. There's a lot of disagreement about herbal terminology. Some purists would say that it's not really a syrup if you've got alcohol in there. Now it's an elixir and whatever. It's fine.
You can call it either one.
Call it
It's
whatever
okay.
you want. So
Yeah.
it's not a big deal.
It's medicine.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
So we've got those two set up. They'll get mixed together. That's all of our Charles River stuff from that same day's harvest. But when we do put the final blend together, we're going to add a few other things. And one big one, at least here for us, is ground ivy tincture. So this is a plant that we tincture earlier in the year. We like to harvest our ground ivy and tincture it when it's flowering, and so that's earlier in the springtime. But we hold on to some of it, and we know that we're going to mix that in to our winter syrup when it's time. So ground ivy is very useful as an ear, nose, and throat decongestant. It helps to drain out excess stagnant fluids that are affecting the sinuses and also the lymph nodes. So in the ears and under your jawline, you've got some lymph nodes in there. And when those are stagnant and swollen, ground ivy is very effective for draining that out. It's one that we find really helpful for ear infections and earaches and things like this where there's a problem of stuck fluid. It's one that's been particularly helpful for you.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of prone to those.
Yeah, I do get ear infections. I get them really, really easily. So ground ivy is like my best friend ever. A lot of times we will put fresh ginger in as well. And we have a couple farms in western Massachusetts that grow fresh baby ginger. And ginger is really hard to say with braces. So we like to take that and put that fresh right into honey and let that extract into the honey. It is so good. And a lot of times we'll mix that into the syrup as well.
Yeah.
So this week I really want to head over to the farmer's market and see if any of it is out yet.
Yeah, sometimes you have to kind of sign up in a week in advance and then come back next time to collect.
Yeah, quantities are limited.
Yeah, because, we're up here and they're growing this in greenhouses even through summertime anyway. But
yeah.
But it's great because, once you've got that ginger infused into the honey and then you drain off the honey and you're going to use that and mix it with your syrup, your elixir, then you have homemade honey candied ginger chunks.
So good.
And those are pretty great, either to just, have as a snack or to chop them up and mix them into some ginger chamomile cookies.
Yes.
Which I think we've got a recipe for those on our website.
Yes, that's my favorite cookie. In fact, we should make some today.
They're pretty great, yeah. Yeah, don't underestimate the loveliness of chamomile flowers mixed into your cookie dough. It's pretty awesome. You grind them first.
Yeah.
There is a powder, yeah. Anyway, so, then your candied ginger goes in there and the whole thing's great.
Or like when you're making rum cake around the solstice,
Yeah, that's the best
you
thing.
put your homemade fresh honey candied ginger. Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So, there's a couple of plants that didn't get into the jar this year, but have made important appearances in years past. So, blue vervain is one that this year there wasn't just a whole lot of it growing by the river. It was kind of a slim year for that, and we'll keep an eye and see if it pops up somewhere else a little further down. But Yeah, so Vervain is one that we do often like to include. This is blue Vervain here, and this one is really good for folks who are kind of type A, kind of need to control everything, kind of feel like they have to do all of the work, and that if they don't do it, then not only will it not get done, but also the world will end, and there'll be just bad problems all over the place.
Like when I get sick and I'm like, I'll just go to bed because I'm sick, and I'll take my laptop with me, and I'll do all this work, and I'll catch up on my email, and I'll... No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, if that's your impulse as well, it's good to, acknowledge that in yourself, preferably in advance, and then to plan for that, and like just put some Vervain right into your go-to, winter syrup remedy, because one of the key things about having a blend like this around is that it's there, it's ready, you know just what to do. And when you're feeling sick and your head's not entirely in the game and you're a little groggy and a little frustrated and just like, what do I get to fix it? Then you see this and it's right there. And you can go ahead and you can mix in one of these herbs to help with your emotional management at the same time.
Yeah.
In advance, as you plan for how you're expecting to feel then. And it's just all ready. It's all taken care of. So Vervain is really great for folks who have that kind of type A personality and need to release some of that tension in order to relax enough that they can allow the body to heal. And so we like to mix that in. We may just go ahead and add in some of a previous tincture of it right in here.
We could, but there's like twice as much wild lettuce as there usually is, and I was kind of using that to compensate. Because I was like, well, there's really not any blue Vervain this year, which might mean that I've learned my lesson, and when I get sick, I'll just go to bed. But I'm not going to count on that. So I put in double wild lettuce, which will be, drowsifying and encourage me towards bed.
Nice. Good plan. And then let's say one other plant that we didn't find growing wild this year, but we may include a tincture we had around from previous harvest, is boneset. So boneset is kind of like I don't want to say second best, but like if elder is the one that everybody knows to take for cold and flu, then boneset is the one that everybody should know to take for cold and flu, because it's just as potent. It's complementary to the elderberry. They have different mechanisms of effect, but the two of them together is better than either one alone. And so we always like to include some boneset in our elderberry syrup or elderberry elixir here. Charles River winter elixir syrup, the whole thing. It's fantastic, and it really does add something. It's another relaxant agent. It is bitter, but in this blend it's going to be hardly noticeable because there's so many other herbs mixed in, and there's the honey and the catnip and the goldenrod tasting good, so that's not something you really need to worry about in this application. Sometimes what we'll do if we didn't include the boneset in it from the beginning is we'll go ahead and we'll have the whole winter syrup all made, all bottled, all mixed and ready to go, and then we'll pour off a shot glass of it and then just squirt in like one dropper full of boneset tincture right at the last moment and then slug it back. And that's a nice ratio for that to be quite potent and very effective. So you can still just add it at the last minute if you need to.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like we said, this was, most of the plants in here were ones that were growing right next to each other along the river. And it was an exercise in taking a look around, not getting so drilled in on the one plant, like I have to go and get the elderberry, but also to look around and say, oh, hey, there's some sumac over there. Does that make sense in this blend? Actually, yeah. And, okay, who else is around here? Oh, hey, there's catnip over there. There's some St. John's wort this year. Wow. And to pay attention to that and to sort of follow the lead that nature is presenting to you there. So we would urge you to do the same in your part of the world. Go out and look and see your elderberry trees, and then take a minute, sit down, look around, see who else is there, and think a little bit about what you know about that herb and if they might be relevant.
Yeah. It's also, so good to have thought ahead because, like you were saying earlier, once you're in the moment of not feeling good, you can't go out and get medicine when you don't feel good. You can barely go to the kitchen and get medicine when you don't feel good. So working ahead that way really, really is helpful. There's a lot of sort of like folk wisdom that says that the plants know what you're going to need that year, and the plants that are abundant are the plants that also are most relevant for the illnesses that are coming. And, that may be a very comforting thing for you, or it might sound like something very unscientific, depending on what kind of personality you have. But I think that it's really lovely to think about that, that the plants that are abundant, I mean, that's what we have. We live in this society where we can get anything anytime we want it. Like, we can get strawberries in whatever month of the year we want them. But historically, we lived so much closer to the land, and we had what we had, and we had what there was to find. So there is something really beautiful about going out and saying, well, there was some blue vervain, but there just wasn't enough to support me harvesting any of it. Mm-hmm. So, okay, we're not going with blue vervain this year. That's not going to go in, and I'm just going to trust that either I don't need it, or there's another plant that can do that job for me, or maybe I could say that less exploitively, like there's another plant that can help me with that work, or there's, it's just not going to be relevant. So just that exercise of trusting that what is available to you is going to be sufficient for what you need is really, really beautiful.
All right. Well, so we hope you found that helpful and inspirational, and that you go out and try this perspective on for size and see how it suits you. We'll be back not too long with another podcast, we hope.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if you want to connect with us some more, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and
YouTube
here and there. Again, we're the Commonwealth Center for Holistic Herbalism, and our own website is commonwealthherbs.com.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, and another big thanks to Katja and Rin for taking the time out of their busy schedules to share all that wonderful information with us. I know I'm feeling inspired now to get out there, gather some elderberries, and then a few different of my favorite plant allies. If you liked the episode, we'd really appreciate it if you shared it and get this information out there a little bit more. Also, if you wouldn't mind, could you please leave us an iTunes review as well as a ranking? That helps with the discoverability of the show. So thank you again so much for listening, and until next time.